don't need expensive supplements to improve your gut health. I am going to share some everyday foods backed by science that can keep your gut feeling its best and how to work them into your weekly meals. Hi, I'm McIver, and I help young and middle-aged adults reduce their risk of developing chronic diseases, things like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and more. If you don't have the time or money to see a registered dietitian, then this is the channel for you. I'm going to jump right into prebiotic foods, and then I'll talk a little bit more about probiotic foods. If you need a little bit more background on gut health overall, or the difference between prebiotics and probiotics, I have another couple of videos that I'll link in the description, and you can absolutely go check those out. Prebiotics are fibers that make it all the way to your large intestine without being digested. And that's important because when they get to the large intestine, they are able to act as food for the microorganisms that live in your gut, what I call your gut bugs. And that's what you want, because providing food for your bugs ensures that they can multiply and they can thrive. This ensures that you can get more bugs and you can get different kinds of bugs because there's enough food for them. And when it comes to overall gut health, what we know is that more abundance and more diversity in the microorganisms that live in your gut is typically associated with better health. So there are 7 prebiotic foods that I recommend most often, but really any high fiber foods are going to be useful for your gut health. The first 2 foods I recommend are garlic and onions.
These are my onions and my garlic. This is my crown jewel.
Garlic and onions are high in a specific carbohydrate called fructan. And fructan does successfully make it all the way to the gut without being digested. Now, things like garlic powder or garlic infused olive oil are not going to pack the same amount of fructan as true garlic or onions will, so they're not going to be effective. But any color onion will work, even shallots. Just the green part of a green onion is not going to be as high in fiber as, say, the white part of a green onion or, again, a whole onion. Now, the third prebiotic food I'm going to recommend is raspberries. Now, all berries are going to have some amount of fiber in them, so they're all going to be useful, but raspberries particularly pack a punch. 1 cup of raspberries can provide about 8 grams of fiber, which is about 1/3 to 1/4 of how much fiber we need in a day. I know where I live, raspberries tend to be pretty expensive and they go bad pretty quickly, so I prefer to buy frozen raspberries, which can extend their shelf life and bring down the cost just a little bit. And freezing them does nothing to change their fiber content. So still a really effective way to get fiber into your diet. The next prebiotic food I like to recommend is oats. Oats are a whole grain, and they specifically contain a type of carbohydrate called beta-glucan. And not only is beta-glucan good for our gut bugs, but it also provides a ton of B vitamins, a ton of phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are just nutrients that we get from plants specifically. And it can help reduce blood sugar, can help manage cholesterol levels and inflammation. I always recommend choosing a just plain oat rather than the packets that have a lot of added sugar in them. And that is because we know that added sugar can be more detrimental to our gut. So what I do is I'll make just plain oatmeal, and then I'll add berries or bananas or sometimes like stewed apples to give it that sweetness, but also increase the fiber even a little bit more. You can also do things like using oats instead of breadcrumbs in a meatloaf. And I've also seen people who make savory oats, throw hot sauce and salsa and maybe a fried egg on top if you are not really into sweets. The 5th prebiotic food I like to recommend is day-old rice. Now, freshly cooked rice does contain some fiber, but when you cook and then cool rice, it builds something called resistant starch. And resistant starch is particularly effective for gut health. It has been shown to reduce blood sugar levels. Resistant starch has also been shown to reduce the markers of inflammation and improve bowel function for adults. You can also get resistant starch from cooking and then cooling other foods like pasta, potatoes, and oats. But again, be mindful of your toppings on those things because a bunch of added sugar or added saturated fat can be more detrimental for our gut. And maybe eating leftover pasta with a nice garlic, onion, onion red sauce on top is part of how the Italians stay so healthy. The sixth prebiotic food I like to recommend is lentils. Lentils provide both soluble and insoluble fiber as well as resistant starch, so they are a really effective prebiotic. Now, soaking your lentils before you cook them can actually help reduce some of the gas or bloating that you might experience when you eat lentils. I also just tend to take a carbohydrate enzyme pill, like a Beano, when I eat lentils. And this is not a sponsored Beano video, but as I've said before, and I will continue to say, I'll happily be an ambassador for Beano anytime. Lentils also provide a plant-based source of iron, as well as a bunch of other essential nutrients. I actually also included lentils as one of my top 7 recommended foods for people who are taking weight loss medications for that exact reason. The 7th prebiotic food I like to recommend is chia seeds. Now, I really love chia seeds for gut health because, like raspberries, they really pack a punch when it comes to fiber. Just 1 ounce or 2 tablespoons of chia seeds will provide 10 grams of fiber, which is about a third of what we need in a day. Chia pudding is a really good option for breakfast, and I personally like to make smoothie bowls and put some chia seeds on top. But you definitely want to start slow if you're not regularly eating chia seeds now. Because they have so much fiber in them, they can cause a lot of gas and even abdominal pain or discomfort if you're not used to getting that much fiber all at once. I put together a free fiber ebook that you can download. I will link it down in the description of this video. You can combine any 3 meals in that ebook to hit your daily fiber goal. And only about 5% of Americans are actually eating the recommended amount of fiber. So a lot of useful information in there for just about anyone. So let's talk about probiotic foods. In a previous video, I talked about the 5 things a probiotic needs to do to be effective. And I talked about the differences between a probiotic supplement and probiotic foods. Now, where I typically land is that most people are going to be better off eating more probiotic foods than paying for a probiotic supplement. For most people, probiotic supplements have just not been effective in doing what all the ads say a probiotic supplement is going to do. Prebiotic foods are food for your gut bugs. Probiotic foods are actually going to deliver more of those live cultures or gut bugs to your digestive tract. Now, you already have a lot of gut bugs naturally. The average human has about 39 trillion microorganisms that make up their microbiome. So to really make a change in your microbiome community, you need to be eating these foods pretty regularly. And by regularly, I mean basically every day. Now, where prebiotic foods were essentially always fiber, probiotic foods are essentially always fermented. So the first probiotic food or foods I recommend is yogurt with live cultures or kefir. Now, many dairy and non-dairy yogurts contain live cultures because that fermentation is what actually gives yogurt its texture and tang. You may not be familiar with kefir, but it is essentially a fermented milk beverage that tends to be a little bit thinner and even a little bit more tangy than yogurt. If you don't have a big appetite in the morning, kefir might actually be a good option for you because it's thinner. It just goes down easier and sometimes sits better in the stomach than solid food or yogurt for some people. Dairy products are also going to provide some protein, some calcium, potentially some vitamin D, as well as some other vitamins and minerals that are going to be really useful in the diet overall. My second probiotic food recommendation is sauerkraut or kimchi. These are 2 different cultures' takes on fermented vegetables. And they're both great options because they are both prebiotics and probiotics. The veggies in there act as a source of fiber and a prebiotic, and that fermentation process is going to provide those microorganisms that are going to be probiotics. Just be sure that if you're buying sauerkraut, you get the unpasteurized version because the pasteurization would actually kill off the microorganisms that you are trying to consume. And a third probiotic food that I recommend is miso. Miso is a fermented soy product. It oftentimes comes as a paste like this, and it is a super useful, super versatile product that has been used in Asia for centuries. I think most Americans were probably introduced to miso through miso soup, maybe when they were ordering sushi or other Asian foods here in the US. They can act as a condiment or a flavor boost in a lot of different dishes. It adds a little bit of a umami or kind of like depth of flavor that oftentimes we get from meat, but this is actually from a plant-based source. There are also some foods that can harm your gut, and we're still learning about, how much is too much when it comes to some of these things, but it seems like too much added sugar or too much artificial sweeteners, too much red meat, too much fat, or too much alcohol can really damage our gut microbiome and the rest of our health as well, really. Now, I also recommend staying away from raw milk as your probiotic vehicle. And it is true that unpasteurized milk has more live cultures than pasteurized milk. However, those microorganisms in unpasteurized milk tend to be pathogens, not probiotics, which means they're making us sick or more sick than the benefits we may be getting from the live cultures. And we can get those beneficial live cultures from other safer sources. And so I would recommend these probiotic and prebiotic foods that I've mentioned in this video rather than choosing raw milk. And finally here, I've mentioned a few different ways that I like to combine these foods, and there's a bunch more options in the fiber book, but I want to just give you some inspiration on how you might combine some of these pre and probiotic foods to really make some healthy gut meals in an easy and cost-effective way. On weeks when I haven't meal prepped something for breakfast, I tend to go for a oatmeal yogurt combo bowl. I will just make some fresh oatmeal, maybe put some peanut butter in there. I will add a bit of yogurt with some raspberries or other berries and sprinkle a little bit of chia seeds on top. That is a nice hearty breakfast, high in both protein and fiber, as well as having that yogurt that's going to give me some of those probiotic gut bugs as well. I also love to do grilled chicken sausages with peppers and onions, and then adding a little bit of sauerkraut as kind of a condiment. That is one of my favorite summer meals. I also love to meal prep rice bowls for the week for my lunches, which is giving me that cooked and then cooled rice. I add a bunch of veggies. I add either tofu or maybe ground meat in there as my protein source. And then if I have leftover rice that I'm not using in my lunches, I'll actually save those for the weekend, and I will fry that rice up with some scrambled eggs for breakfast. And then to both the lunch bowls and that crispy rice breakfast, I'll add kimchi on the top. That resistant starch from the cooked and cooled rice, the probiotics from the kimchi, a really easy gut-friendly meal that lasts the whole week. And then I didn't mention sourdough on this list, but sourdough is fermented and so can provide some probiotics. And so I love in the winter doing a nice hearty lentil stew and having a piece of crusty sourdough bread on the side. These are not wildly innovative or exciting meals, but they allow me to eat intentionally by getting lots of vitamins, lots of minerals, as well as my prebiotics and probiotics without having to spend too much time, too much money, too much effort on cooking, which is just really not how I prefer to spend my time, even as a registered dietitian. So I hope that this video has been useful in giving you some ideas of how to improve your gut health without having to spend a ton of money on probiotic supplements that may or may not actually be effective for you. If it was, I would so appreciate if you gave this video a thumbs up. It tells the YouTube robots that it should show this video to more people like you. And if you want to know more about gut health or other simple and effective ways to stay healthy, subscribe to this channel. I will be putting more videos out every week. Thanks for being here.